welcome to the Nile Book Club. This is our 4th edition, and the Nile Book Club is really dedicated to just creating an inclusive space for people to talk about the things that they get from books. And also we have a spin on Afrocentric or African-centered sort of works. Kalungi, have I missed anything like crucial?
No, I think you got it. Definitely, like focusing on writers who either, write about Africa or who are, they themselves are African. So far we started with Chinua Achebe with Things Fall Apart. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was the first African author to be published. At least post-colonial, maybe. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, and so we went from Chinua Achebe to I think the second one was Jennifer Nantubuga Makumbi. Was that the second one? Katasi?
Yeah, that was the second one.
Yeah. Then Zikora by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and then now here We Are All Birds of Uganda by Hafsa Zayaan. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, we're good to go to get started. Like, Katasi, do you want to start with what you thought?
Oh, wait. So for the viewer at home, Kalungi, do you want to summarize what the book's about?
Of course, yeah. So the book is from the point of view of Samir. And Samir is a Leicester-born Asian Ugandan. So his grandparents were actually part of the Asians who were expelled from Uganda, and his granddad made his way to Leicester via Belgium, and most of his family spent about 10 years in Leicester. But where we find the story in present day London, and Samir is a successful lawyer, Cambridge educated, but he clearly has, he's got this sense of lack of fulfillment. And he's looking for some sort of purpose. And that kind of leads to him trying to discover more about his past. And what he discovers actually aches him and it hurts him. And he tries to rectify that by going to Uganda to try to reconnect with his past. But we also get to hear letters that were written by his Ugandan Asian granddad, who was writing to his dead wife, his first wife. And that's where Samir discovers kind of, I guess, the harsh truths about his granddad and his past. And so that's the, I guess, crazy mad kind of summarizing of the story.
Yeah, that was a good summary. So what did I think? Before I read the book, I had lots of reservations about it because growing up in England and being Ugandan, the first thing that people always say to you is, when you mention where you're from, is, oh, Idi Amin, so you carry this weight around of this attachment, which is really quite narrow-minded, I think, because there's so much more to know about Uganda than Idi Amin. And so when I think I came into it quite defensive, if I may say, thinking, okay, what's she going to write about? And then to top it off, but her not being Ugandan, I questioned, if writers who are not from the place, especially like, I don't want to say special.
Sorry, but how is she not Ugandan?
She's not Ugandan, Vivian. Her mother's Pakistani and her father's Nigerian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought she was.
No.
Oh, really?
Her partner, it turns out, her partner is of South Asian Ugandan heritage.
Oh, wow.
I think they're probably first English, British, or whatever. So I went in questioning, like, what authority do people have to write about places that they're not from? And I think rhetoric around the South Asian expulsion has always been imbalanced. So I thought, like, oh, this is another work that's just going to like feed into this very one-sided sort of narrative. And then I got into it, and I was actually really enjoying it. And and I wouldn't say reluctantly so, because I was like, actually, this is really good. I'm really liking Samir. He's so relatable. And and it was interesting to just sort of hear more of the South Asian experience, because I don't think I knew much about it, because I think it was also quite educational in a way. Like, she did a lot of research, so I felt like there were lots of things to sort of take away, and more emotional aspects as opposed to the more factual stuff that you get when you hear about it on the news or on the anniversary. But I'll just pause there before I get into other bits.
Oh, wow. I mean, I'm actually pleasantly surprised that she's not Ugandan, because I thought she was Ugandan. I thought she was like of Indian heritage. And so I'm very positively surprised, because I love the book. I found that the way she wrote about Uganda was so authentic. Yes. And my background is that I lived in Uganda for 12 years of my life. So between 12 and 19, I lived in Uganda. So I know Uganda. And all the things she spoke about, I could relate to. But I really loved the way she broke down the problematic Southeast Asian and Ugandan relationship of kind of master and slave. But yeah, I really enjoyed the book. I did. I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I you know what? I was a bit like you, Katasi. Like, I was a bit kind of reluctant to dive deep into the book, because I was kind of a bit apprehensive, because it feels like the kind of the Asian Ugandan narrative sometimes trumps the, I guess, what you'd call the Black Ugandans or the native Ugandan narrative in regards to kind of like literature. And you do, we all know Idi Amin from Last King of Scotland, and I know that was written by a white guy. I think he was a Scottish guy. We know the film Entebbe. We know Queen of Katwe, which again was written by a white guy from a point of view of a young Ugandan girl. And so you rarely get the Black Ugandan experience. You have people like Jennifer Nansuga Makumbi and Moses Isagawa with Abyssinian Chronicles, and a few others that I'm embarrassed that I don't know about. But it just feels like sometimes people associate Uganda with, oh, that's the country that kicked out the Asians. And even though that is a fact, a historical fact, I just worried reading this book that it was going to be another one that was going to vilify the Ugandans. But actually, I was really compelled and pulled into the story. And just how, like you said, Katasi, how likable and relatable Samir was at the start. Very annoying at times, just be decisive. But I guess that's part of the conflict of the novel. But yeah, so I really enjoyed like what you said, Vivian, that the problematic kind of views that some South Asians who live in Uganda, but even the ones that outside of Uganda have the views they have towards the Blacks. I think they called them the Karias or whatever. And yeah, and that kind of that racism they had towards them was horrendous. But of course, you can't deny the fact that there are some Ugandans that also have beef with Asians for whatever reason, whether it be they feel like the opportunities are being taken away from them and so on and so forth. But I like the fact that she didn't shy away from that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. She didn't shy away from actually opening that Pandora's box. You know what I mean? And portraying them in that light. So I definitely agree with you.
Absolutely. I did, and I think this is a problem more for the editor, not for Hafsa Zayaan, the author. I saw like a major typo.
Same. There were two. Oh, I cringed.
I think the main one was the Kabaka one.
Yeah, it was Kakaba.
Kakaba, yeah, on chapter 14.
And then Askari was written with a C instead of a K. I know it's trivial.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But even that as well, but that's like probably, and that also as well, Bobby Wine was spelled, I know it's...
Yes, with a Y and not an I. I saw that too.
As I know it's small and tiny, but I just thought that's where maybe the authenticity sometimes, and the authenticity was a bit questioned at times.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, as us three Ugandans, we immediately went, oh
we
no,
know.
that wasn't spelled properly. Kabaka. But that's an editor's thing. Or something like you said, the Askari. I'm ashamed to say I don't know what Askari is.
Askari is a gate man, like a god.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Now you see something that's telling, oh, Bobby Wine, we all know he spells his name as B-O-B-I.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that kind of made me start to question some other things that she was writing in the perspective of the Ugandans, you know? When Samir went to Uganda, or his dad Hassan or his granddad Hassan was telling the story, I started thinking, is this, like Katasi said, like, does she have the right information to be able to tell this story? If I was writing something in Lagos, set in Lagos, I would make sure, like, to the T, and I know that the Lagosians would come for me if I said something wrong.
Yeah.
Like if I even just said one pigeon thing wrong and like said it wrong and used it, there would be
viral.
Yeah, you go viral. So I feel like anyone who takes on the subject matter of Uganda, and if they're not as connected to Uganda, then, or they don't have a kind of a familial relation to Uganda, then I think they should do some very deep research, the same level of deep research you do if you're writing about somewhere else. And Uganda shouldn't be a free-for-all where it's like, oh, there's only 45 million of them on the actual continent, and then a further probably a couple million outside of the diaspora. They're not gonna drop this, but we did, and it does jar a little bit.
Yeah,
you know?
I think you're really right. Like in terms of it, when you have a huge typo like that, and you know, speaking from the place of someone who is a Muganda, right? I mean, I'm not a royalist per se, but I respect the institution. So to get a significant title like that makes you question like where you're placing that cultural institution as per se in terms of its importance, because you wouldn't make a typo like that around like Her Royal Highness. You know, you'd get those things right because there's a protocol. And I think I really admire the idea of murky books, you know, diversifying who writes and like making it much more accessible to those who are hardly seen. But I think the danger is that it stops there and the rest of your team are then just sort of white men. And I think she says in an interview, her editor is a white man. So I think when you are not from a place, if we're going to exhaust the subject, it's important to surround yourself with a team that are beyond her acknowledgements. Like I know she did that research and everything, but your editorial team, it would benefit tremendously from having people from that place. I don't know what you think about that.
I totally agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I agree.
And because I thought she was Ugandan, I was thinking to myself, oh, how come she didn't ask like a Ugandan friend to kind of be like, how do you spell this? So, you know what I mean? So, but now that I've been informed that she's not Ugandan at all, more so needing a team of Ugandans who can like just set you straight on whatever on whatever it is you're trying to explain or write about.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think her being so like I left the book when I concluded the book. I just felt like that was no longer a problem. Like her not being Ugandan was not an issue because she was talking about a very unique Ugandan experience, and that through the lens of being South Asian. And I think she was able to sort of borrow from her lived experience in terms of writing about, say, the UK aspect about Leicester family and really getting into Samir's family. So I think it was very smart in how she was able to take her life experiences and like put them into the book. And I don't think that it took away from it at all in that sense.
I mean, the way she wrote was really beautiful. I really, really enjoyed the book. And apart from those typos, I did not feel that I felt that her writing of Uganda was really authentic. And I say that as a Ugandan who's lived in Uganda for a number of years and also who's gone back on holiday. And you know what I mean? Like, so I could look at it from someone who used to live in Uganda and someone who goes on holiday. So I can see it from two aspects. And I felt that that was quite authentic.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm not to kind of devalidate what you just said, but, and again, I have to kind of like say that I lived in Uganda for 10 years, but I lived there as a child, and I've gone back and forth, but again, for a limited amount of time. But I just felt like in comparison to the descriptions about Leicester and London and you know, the Indian family, Uganda was a bit sparse in the authenticity side, but it could just be because I had the assumption that she's got a closer affinity to the Asian side. I know she's from Pakistan, but she maybe had a closer kind of connection, and maybe there was a proximity to people she could speak to and ask questions about the Leicester side or the Asian side. But with the Ugandan side, I felt like maybe more the characters, maybe not the landscape of Uganda itself, but the characters were a bit sparse. And I think she could have dived deeper into some of the characters' stories and maybe, yeah, like characterization more in the same way she did with the other characters like Sama or you know, Mota, is it Papa, Mota Papa, you know, stuff like that. We really got like an idea of these characters, but people like, you know, even Abdullah, like he was very sparse with Abdullah. Like I wanted to know more about him, and at times I'm not gonna lie to you, I was confused between Abdullah and Ibrahim, but it just might be my reading and not being able to read.
Kalungi, I agree. I felt like it was a little bit, there were a lot of characters, and maybe there's like Yasmin Foa. I don't know, I'm not quite sure what value she brought to the family, like to a story. Like there were so many extended family members, but that's also very typical of like that family setting. But sometimes I did feel like I can't keep up, like I need a family tree of some sort, but I'm just going to focus on the main characters. But just to go back to your point about the characterization of the Africans, I agree. And I felt like they were very silenced. The only person that was really vocal or had much of a voice, even though she was also objectified, was Mariam. You know, we didn't know much about, say, Mr. Shah's helpers. You know, they were voiceless. And we all know that in Uganda, house helps always have so much information on their bosses. So I would have wanted to hear more from them. And I just think that was missing in terms of the African perspective and the African voice.
Yeah, in her defense, she does say that in the reading group questions towards at the end, she says that, you know, what would have happened if maybe the story was through the perspective of Abdullah, the black friend of her son. Again, you got the black friend, like, and it did jar me that we were in Uganda and you spend a lot of time with Mr. Shah, you know, you saw Uganda through that perspective. And then the time when he actually starts meeting Black Ugandans, like say Patrick, the guy that works in the juice bar with them, you know, or the guy that approaches him and puts it on him and says, "Look, listen, you've taken stuff away from me." Then they disappear and that's it. But then you linger so much on Mr. Shah or Aliyah, and then there's no fruitful relationship, especially in the perspective from the point of view of Aliyah. Like it's just an opportunity for you to get to the high life, the lit life in Uganda, but you can get to that through the black characters. There are wealthy middle class black Ugandans that he could have met. Now, would they hang out with the Asians? I think they would, because I have cousins who go to Aga Khan and they're friends with a lot of young Indian kids, you know, and I'm sure they go and live, you know, good life with them. So I think, I don't know, that I loved the book. I thought it was great. It was a great read. I loved it, but I just felt it could have done with a bit more life given to the Ugandan and the black characters. Even Jeremiah, like, come on, Jeremiah was just like a random beat maker that popped in to make him feel good about himself. And then he becomes really successful because an American rapper comes and recognizes his mixing abilities. It was very peripheral, and it just made me wonder, is that how Black people are viewed even in their own country, like Uganda? Like, we're just peripheral, like you know what I mean? Like the Asians would come in and maybe we are seen like that. I just feel like she did address it, but I think another way of addressing it maybe would have been to breathe life into these characters, breathe life into Musa. He's not just your guy, you know, Amma and Paul. I wanted to know more about Amma. You know, Paul, like I thought you're going to tell us about Paul the driver, you know, the beginning. But no, he comes, he goes, never see him again.
Yeah, they were quite docile characters, weren't they? I mean, I think this goes back to the point of when you're writing about a place and you're not from it. So for me, knowing that this is going to be like a seminal book in terms of talking about the South Asian expulsion, your average person that picks up this book, then, whilst we know it's fiction, it's really based on lots of like research. And I think in an interview, she referred to it as wanting it to be like an educational tool. So if you are not then including the voices of Africans, I feel like whilst she does make mention as she's narrating about like the tensions and things like that, there was an opportunity to go more and hear the Ugandan indigenous voice, I think, apart from just a few facts that she littered around the novel. But then that being said, maybe it was intentional that Samir was not associating with other Africans, and essentially he was just like replicating his grandfather's behavior. Maybe that was intentional.
Yeah, definitely. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was her, as you say, intention, because I think Samir also, like, defying his family. Are we allowed to talk like what happened we're allowed to talk about what happened?
Oh yeah, because people that watch this have read it, or we just let them know spoilers, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, him being like meeting Mariam and like falling in love with her and knowing that this will not go down well with his family. I think her putting that putting that twist in the book really shows that, I don't know, Samir wanted to be his own man, and in so doing, like, his happiness was of importance to him, and he just felt that, you know, I'm tired of having like obeyed my family all these years. I've done whatever they want, and now I'm gonna live for me. And I found that very brave of him to do so.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Like, but I can't. While you were saying that, I was thinking, I feel like his granddad loved Uganda more than Samir did. I think he only stayed for Mariam. Like, he only extended that ticket because he was starting to fall in love with Mariam, and he hadn't even kissed her properly. He probably only kissed her once. So he wanted, do you know what I mean? The only bird of Uganda he cared about was Mariam. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it felt like his connection and kind of love for Uganda was because of a woman. And as romantic and great that is, it kind of makes me think that what happens when he falls out of love with Mariam? Like, you know, he'll be ready to kind of either stay and become another kind of Mr. Shah, or he'll just bounce and go back to England and find another love and continue with his life. He still has that safety net. And I questioned his kind of reasons for staying in Uganda. And Mariam does tell him that maybe he didn't think this through. And for that reason, he was really an annoying narrator for that reason. Like, he was just making some really frustrating decisions. And it's like, bro, like, be decisive or think things through, and don't just like, I don't know. I don't think you should follow your heart all the time, especially when something as life-changing as marriage, and you're changing this woman's life, you know, who really like is going to be affected by you being here. Like, people will be looking at her differently, you know, because she's with an Asian, you know, her life has changed completely. But he was I felt sometimes he was very self-centered, actually.
Oh, wow. Like, his father thought the same thing.
Hmm?
His father thought the same thing. Okay, so when the romance was like put into the story, I was rooting for it. I was like, oh my God, when are they gonna kiss? When are they gonna kiss? Like I was just a sucker for romance. But then you're right, like Samir, I just think Samir was very troubled. He was looking for himself, wasn't he? Through his religion, through Mariam. So I just felt more sorry for him than anything, as opposed to like frustration. Yeah. There's something else you said, but I can't remember what it is.
I mean, I don't, to be honest, like, I applauded Samir because he met Mariam, he fell in love with her, and he wanted to marry her. Like at the end of the day, they were both Muslims. Like in their religion, you don't just you marry immediately. Like if you, not that if you know, but it's different from, like, if you're not religious, I think it's maybe hard to comprehend that the girl's family is not going to allow you to like be her girl boyfriend for the next 3 years. It doesn't work that way. Do you know what I mean? So he did the honorable thing. He met this woman. He fell in love with her. Yeah, he may not have loved Uganda as much as his granddad did, but he was willing to give it a chance. Do you know what I mean? And he was willing to settle in Uganda, make something for himself and Mariam, and just take it from there. And for that, I commend him. Do you know what I mean? Because he could have been like, you know what? I'm going to bounce back to the UK. I don't want to be here. But he was willing to stay, to like honor her and her family, marry her, and even at that, like defy his parents. And we know how Asians can be. Like when it comes to family, like they say no, it's a no. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't mix. Like seriously, they don't mix. And so for him to be like, no, this is the woman I've met and I love her. And even though he had never kissed her, never had sex with her, like he knew in his heart of hearts whom he wanted. And I love the way she described that love story. Of course, there were holes in Mariam's like character. Like I wanted to know more about her. Like what were her dreams? What were her goals? What were her ambitions? You know what I mean? Like yes, she was older. She was like what, 35? She was way older than him. But yeah, I just commended him for doing the right thing. Like at the end of the day, he did the right thing and he married her. Yeah. And I think I mean I say that as having been married almost 11 years, so I can see where he's coming from. Like when you have met that person, and yes, it's you just know. You've kissed so many frogs, and you just know when you meet that one person. And I think that's how he felt.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's no disagreement there. And maybe I'm talking from a single guy's point of view. Maybe there is a little bit of hateration, because he took Mariam away from me. But
don't hate, baby. Appreciate. Okay.
But I don't know. I was a bit like sorry, I was a bit like I was thinking the same thing that Mariam's family was thinking, like his reason for marrying her. Like, I questioned his reasons for it. Like, it just feels like after the story, something else is gonna come up. Because think about the things, like the different things that were going on in his life. He was, first he had, the Singapore job, and then he was looking forward to that to a certain extent. And then he didn't do it. Or even before then, like he was meant to go into business with his family. And you kind of wonder sometimes, someone who's willing to kind of disobey his family that made them sacrifices all them years ago and helped him get through college, was willing to literally mess up his childhood sweetheart relationship for the best. Someone who's willing to kind of betray his family like that, how is he going to be with Mariam once she stops being to a certain extent, fetish that he sees her to be? When she stops being the novelty, what happens after that? Yes, the last sentence is he thinks of Mariam, the last sentence of the book. But I just feel like, is he not going to get tired of that? Just like he changed his mind about, going into work for his dad. changed his mind about Singapore, changed the ticket. He was meant to be in Uganda for 2 weeks. He keeps changing his mind. Mariam's just another project for this young man. And when he gets tired of Mariam, he's going to go off and start something else. You go to Kenya and find a Latifa, you know, someone else, someone new.
Kalungi, okay, sorry, yeah, go on.
Well, I was just going to say that let's give Samir a break. Samir was breaking protocol, yeah? And you sound like, you know, Kalungi sound like Samir's dad, you know? God forbid what kind of parent you might be, you know?
God forbid.
I think he was doing Vivian said, he was doing a very brave thing. And I think he was on this journey to find himself. And he never had the option to make choices, you know, all this family obligation, like that's a heavy thing. In South Asian culture, even in like Ugandan context too, you know, we've just moved away from our traditions. But, you know, before, when you did a Kwanjula, Vivian, I don't know what part of Uganda you're from, but, you know, Baganda, we also did arranged marriages. So our culture is just a bit far removed than theirs is, you know. So I think he was doing like a very radical thing. But you're right, like she was a series of decisions. Like he was finding himself through her, you know. But yeah, I mean, it was all quite selfish, really. Like, oh, I've started this juice business, but it's a lot of work. Well, what did you expect? Of course, it's going to be work. And I just think he was looking for recognition. Like he was looking to be heard, and Mariam heard him.
And he stole that juice thing from Amma. Amma gave him the concoction to
By the way, you're right.
He stole that idea.
That's what, sorry?
You know the juice of mixing the Ugandan ingredients with the Asian thing. Wasn't it Amma?
It was tamarind and like papaya, yes.
Yeah, Amma gave that to him to lose his headache, whatever the hangover thing he had. And then he went, oh, I got this idea. I think there'll be a market. Bro, you just stole Amma's idea and you didn't even hire her. Like, you see,
but it's a bit more complicated than that, because at the end of the day, like, Uganda is known for its juices. You know what I mean? Like, you go into a restaurant and they'll have like a juice menu with 20 different kind of mocktails. You know what I mean? And we're known for our fruits, we're known for but the thing is, one thing I do remember in the book where this other guy, the Ugandan guy, came in and was like, you know, you put me out of business. And I felt that was a bit unfair, because it goes back to exposure. All right. When you see someone who has lived in Uganda all their life and who has never been abroad, and you meet someone and then you compare it to someone who has had both feet on both continents, our mindsets are different. Do you know what I mean? Like, the way we reason is different. And therefore, exposure comes in, because this person might have been doing juice, right? And having his stock on the supermarkets, but maybe his flavor was passion and orange. Yeah. And people were buying it because that's what there was. And then now Samir comes in and his concoction has a bit of coconut, a bit of tamarind, you know, a bit of papaya. And people are like, hey, okay, I'm liking this. This tastes really good. So you can't really fault. And at the end of the day, it's an open market. Anyone should be able to come in. But I know it is unfair to the Ugandan guy, but it's all about, you need to expose yourself. Yes, you might not be able to jump onto a plane and go to the UK or whatever, to another country, but there's so many ways of educating ourselves today. We've got the internet. Every Ugandan has a smartphone. Do you know what I mean? Like, go online, look up recipes. And that's the problem with our people. Like, we're so happy being in our, like, you know, in our bubble. We don't, and then when someone comes with a better thing, or be a business young, and it's like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, I'm getting like agitated or excited, but it's like, I know it's so easy to blame someone else for your failures. So, okay, he came in and he did better than you. Now you top him. You know what I mean?
But anyway, going back to Kalungi, going back to
Wait, Vivian, just before we go back to that, I think that was like one of the central themes of the book, right? Because in Hassan, sorry, in Samir's grandfather's letters, that was always his defense, you know. There was a particular line around Obote, like, you know, they can't see the fact that they're stalling without blaming it on us, something along those lines, right? So the very fact that South Asians were even in Uganda, fine, some came as indentured servants, right? Others came as purely business people, but I think that was like a central theme, like, is this something instinctive in them, that they have this blood, you know, that's how the grandfather speaks, it's in our blood, it's in our DNA.
They are merchants, that's what they are, even here,
Well,
even in the
you know,
UK, you see it.
I think that was like verging on eugenics, right? In terms of like superiority and race and race. And I think that you speak from a privileged place in terms of exposure and whatnot. And I think when we think about like Idi Amin and the politics around the expulsion, and we think about like Mugabe taking it, you know, taking the farms away from the white people, these are all protectionist measures, right? And I think that Uganda is just too open. So when you go to Middle East, for example, in Dubai or in Latin America, you can't just come as a foreigner and just test, you know? In fact, he wasn't even on like a proper visa. He was on like a visitor's visa. And here he was setting up this business. So essentially he was replicating the same behavior as his grandfather. And like, essentially my call to action is that like, if we're going to think about protectionism and protecting our economies, like he could have done it very differently. He could have collaborated with that young man.
Definitely.
But instead he was just riding off of his privilege.
That is true. That is true. I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that is true. But I think also it just boils down to so many things. It boils down to a big problem we have in Uganda, and that is corruption. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're not going to protect our economy and put these measures in place because they do want these foreigners to come in and start their businesses, so that when they do, they're able to be like, oh, okay, yeah, but I need 100K USD for you to be able to set up your business. Pay me that and I'll help you. Do you know what I mean? So it's yeah.
Kalungi, what do you think?
No, before I say what I think, Vivian, you were going to say something to my point.
Yeah, the hateration was happening. The thing is, like, let me tell you one thing, Kalungi, and I'm going to say this to you, and I hope that one day I'll be a witness to this. Kalungi, when you meet the one, you will not tire of her. You know what I mean? Like, you will not get bored of her. You will not be like, oh, it's been 2 years, off to the next project. No, you are going to invest yourself into this person. You have married this woman. You have stood in front of God and your family, and you've said, till death do us part. From then on, it's just going to go upwards. And don't get me wrong, marriage is not easy. I know there are ups and downs, but I'm saying in general, because it's not static. With time, you're going to get kids. Do you know what I mean? And it's just going to get more and more and more beautiful. That's why, for me, like, I just commend Samir for his bravery. Because at the end of the day, we know that in Uganda, Asians, they don't mix. Like, we know that. They do not mix. So for him to just say, she's the one, and just defy everything. And not only that, with the Singapore thing, his dad, he killed the chance. He called the boss and was like, oh, he's not going. So that died. Do you know what I mean? So he couldn't go. And then Mr. Shaw comes into the picture and he sees he's doing well in Uganda. And the thing is, like, I'm not like generalizing, but the fact is, like, I think for Asians, like, wealth is so important. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's important to all of us, but for them, like, success is measured on a whole other scale. So you have to be successful. Do you know what I mean? Whether it is that you're a lawyer, or you have dukas, you have shops, or you have takeaways, or do you know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to show your community that you have done something. Do you know what I mean? So he has seen this from being a young boy. his dad had businesses, they were doing well. He saw his uncles. And so, of course, even him, he knew that, my family expects something good from me. You know what I mean? And so him, he saw the world as his oyster. And it's like, if I'm going to leave the UK, fine. I can go to Uganda and make it big like Mr. Shah. The way he went about it is to be questioned. Do you know what I mean? But I think at the end of the day, he wasn't very different from his granddad. I'll be honest. And yeah, when it came to I agree, he could have collaborated with this person, and I mean, he did feel bad, which was good. So he did feel guilt and remorse. But I think that having an interracial relationship with or marriage with this woman, it was really, really brave of him. Like I commend him because I failed. Personally, I failed. But so yeah, it's I don't know. She just there's so many themes in this book, and you can see that it's a book that people will be reading at universities doing English. It's a book that touches on so many different topics. But I will commend her for not having because I saw that, okay, she's kind of, I could see that she wasn't like black. So I was like, okay, I wonder what her take is going to be on this. You know what I mean? But I do commend her for being honest about the Southeast Asian side.
You mean You mean South Asian?
South Asian, yeah.
South Asian, yeah.
Southeast.
Southeast is like
sorry, not Southeast. That's another one. Yeah, South Asian. Like she was honest about the fact is they see themselves as superior, and we know that. You know what I mean? Like you go to Uganda and you go into, I don't know, a business, and they're looking down at you thinking, who is this? You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway.
Both of you made some really good points. That's why I had to just sit there and just listen, and I was taking that in. But actually, Vivian, I'm gonna have to kind of push back a little bit against what you said about maybe the problem with Ugandans is that we kind of tend to blame other people. I don't know if that very well is there is a truth to that, but I think sometimes there is some truth to the blaming of other people, how other foreigners, even someone like myself, might be able to start a business quicker in Uganda than the average Ugandan who's been there their whole lives. And that's a lot to do with capital and money and access to that kind of stuff.
Exposure, everything.
Exactly. But I don't know if the exposure is necessarily the thing, because there are Ugandans that have been in Uganda their whole lives and they're very successful, and they may not have been exposed to Western life. And that's kind of implying that being exposed to, Western or foreign kind of exposures leads to success in Uganda. But I think the main factor that contributes to the Asian success is something that, Hafsa Zayaan mentions, is the fact that they keep within their community.
Exactly.
So Said and Sons was within Said and Sons, and of course Abdullah was instrumental, but he wouldn't even let him be a shareholder, and that was addressed. And also, they have access to a large amount of capital where they can go into certain rooms, and they could, like you said, you need USD 100K to start this business. That's light work. I got that. Here, take a little extra 10 for your troubles. Whereas your average Ugandan might not have that. And even the ones who are maybe corrupt, the ones that do have it are the corrupt politicians or the business people. But I just kind of always question. I always want to ask people this, right? And maybe you guys can maybe dispel this myth I've had in my mind. In all the years you've been in Uganda, right? Have you ever seen a young Asian kid begging on the street or sleeping rough on the street, whether they're Southeast Asian or South Asian? No, because the Asians that are in Uganda are usually very successful Asians, right? And this isn't taking anything away from them. They worked hard and to come back after the expulsion or to just come straight from India. But why is it then that we kind of like have to hear the narrative that there's this mistreatment or this mistrust, you know, that Mr. Shah might bring in and go, oh, these Ugandans don't work hard. Well, actually, there's a lot of other kind of barriers to entry that's stopping these young Ugandans like Patrick from working, from being successful. You're moving him around like a chess piece. First he's in your business, and then you just pawn him off to Samir's business, and the poor kid has ambitions to go off to uni to become an engineer. He might never even work that job. You know, that guy that came in, I have to disagree. That guy that came in and said, you took my stuff away, you took my opportunity away. He was right in saying that, because Samir didn't get that opportunity because his juices tasted better. He got them because Mr. Shah had clout, and he was able to call up the people and arrange. He arranged all this stuff before Samir touched down on Kampala. Like he arranged that stuff. This poor guy that came in was probably having his juice business for years, and now they don't want to have his juice because it's not mixed with turmeric. Like, that's not fair. Orange and passion fruit might taste just as good. And him, and then Samir, like we said, got these ideas for the infusion from a native Ugandan. And he's sourcing these fruits within Uganda. It's not like he's going all the way to Denmark to get some special passion fruit or special fruit that Ugandans don't have. No, he's getting it from neighboring Uganda or Kenya or Tanzania, whatever. He's getting fruits within the land. So what exposure has he got that's different to that poor lad that got his business taken away from him? The only difference here, the only difference is he's exposed to bigger capital via Mr. Shah with all his golden rings and Versace shirt. So he's able to call up the people. Like, he runs a bloody sugar factory. So of course he's gonna have access to all this. And even if I guarantee those juices tasted terrible, but because they're foreign, it's from a different guy. Saeed and Sons is special. It tastes better than Sebunya's sugar or Sebunya's juice. But Sebunya's juice might taste better than Samir's juice, you know?
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but then at the end of the day, like, exposure is also about being able to see a hole in the market. Do you understand? Like, exposure, it's about being able to go to Kampala and you're like, or to the Mukafe, and you're like, you know what? If they did this and this, that could actually, like, sorry, my kids are just going a bit crazy. That could, and that could actually, sorry, and that could actually, and you're sitting there and you're like, if I did this and this, if I opened up a place, but I did this, this, and this, it could work. And that exposure is because you have seen, you've seen other scenarios that Ugandans may not have seen. You know what I mean? And then also going back to your point of all Asians are successful. Let me tell you something. All Asians in Uganda are not successful. But what they have, and unfortunately, majority of us Ugandans do not have, is patience. We're not patient. We're not patient. An Asian family, they will share one house and there could be like 6 families living in one house. Honestly. And
yes, Vivian, they're not living in a shack. It's probably quite palatial in the way that it was described with this like the Lester family, like with his huge tennis courts.
Definitely, but I'm not only referring to the book. I'm also referring to what I've seen. Because when I lived in Uganda in the 90s, not all Asians, and then that kind of come back, not all Asians were well off. And I'm not taking away from what you've said, Kalungi. I understand that they have clout. I understand that they have capital, but also for them, they work in a different way as a community than maybe African communities work. Do you know what I mean? Like, they will kind of like lend each other money and do it within the community. They don't need banks. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I hear what you're saying around like the Asian community, and like I think it's a place like one has to tread quite carefully, because then we start sort of like, I don't know, like there's something about like romanticizing or like creating, or I don't know how to say it, but we are reinforcing these stereotypes around like Black Africans are like this and South Asians are like this. And like, that's the current rhetoric. And I think what we're not speaking about is the fact that South Asians in Uganda do not assimilate. So whilst we're commending them, commending them for being very tight knit and lending money to themselves or within their communities, we're not talking about the fact that apart from say like the older generation, like they're not learning the language, they're not intermarrying. You know, that's all to do with this like racial supremacy around how they see themselves. And I think that kind of stuff needs to be called out. And Hafsa does that by just putting it there. But then I think it's just left to the reader to imagine. And again, I think it goes back to our initial point, like those themes around like anti-Blackness were there and they were quite subtle, but I really wanted them to be much more illuminated.
I think also, I agree with you, because I think what I also found a bit problematic was that, what was I going to say? Someone else talk. I'm just going to remember what I was going to say.
Okay, and I was just going to say, Mariam, interestingly, she didn't challenge when Samir told her about this young man who came to her. Her thing was, well, how do you know that his drinks aren't good enough? Like, it was a bit of a cop-out. Like, she didn't sort of come with this angle, but we're presenting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the problem I have, is that, like, going back to your point, Katasi, is that there's this idea that's been painted about Africans in general, like enterprising Africans, is that we're typically not good enough. That's why we're not successful. Whereas like the Asians are viewed as merchants, like you just mentioned, or when you think of like the Asians in Uganda, Baba Ita, they call them, you know, investors if they're like from Southeast Asia, or the, you know, Abayindi if they're like, you know, we see this, it being Indian is synonymous with being enterprising and a business person. Whereas being African, even in Africa, is considered to be either, you know, like you said, impatient, or like, you know, the books suggest lazy, they're seen as servants, careers, you know, and even the ending of the book, it ends with Samir being pursued and chased by these potentially scary, villainous Black Ugandans who shout out the term but Muyindi, that's kind of perceived to be as derogatory, you know, and there's this kind of idea that maybe he's gonna, it's a cliffhanger, it's ambiguous, but it's kind of like implied that he's gonna get jumped. So in the end, we're going back to what James Baldwin said, that back in the days when he used to work, ironically enough, when he used to watch, you know, cowboys and Indians, and you're rooting for the cowboy shooting the Indian, and you're like, rah, I'm the Indian, like I'm the Native American, and I'm rooting for this white man to kill me. So effectively, I'm rooting for this Donny to come in, and no disrespect to Samir, but I'm rooting for him to come in and effectively do what his granddad did and just make the native Ugandan servants, and, you know, always be wary of them. He was scared. You see that image that where he just been chopping up some oranges, some apples, so he had his knife when the guy came to the shop. And that was a really powerful image, because if that's in the film, you're looking at it, he appears kind of either scared or he appears confrontational. He doesn't mean to be, but the metaphor is he's always going to be on guard from henceforth, because these Black people want revenge for him taking opportunities from them. And I don't want to have that kind of like mentality of where I'm rooting for him to be successful at the expense of the native Ugandans. It should either be in collaboration with them, or we should find a way to uplift the Ugandans who are there and they've got their businesses. Don't just like focus on foreign investment all the time. Also focus on the kind of like domestic investment, you know, in line with the foreign investment that's going to bring jobs, because they don't always bring jobs, foreign investments. And unfortunately, Samir's is a definite example of that. Like his business is just it's just a little project for him that I feel is probably gonna like fizzle out in a few years' time, and then he go back to England with Mariam, possibly once the dad dies, because the only thing that was holding Mariam in Uganda was the fact that she has to look after the dad. She talked about Canada, how Canada was much better at the equipment. As soon as the dad dies, he's going to plant that seed in there. Go, remember Canada? Let's not go England. Let's go Canada. You know, and I just don't. Yeah, I just don't like the narrative of like Black people are not capable, and the reason they're not successful is because we're impatient and lazy, and other people are successful because they're willing to put in the work. We do put in the work. It's just there's other restrictions.
I mean, so we're almost at time, but I mean, my two final thoughts are, for the average person that's going to pick up this book, right? And like having listened to a few podcasts, I'm not sure. And I wonder what you think. Like, does this do justice to the situation? Does it actually create the balance that's needed? But actually, in hearing a few sort of reviews of the book, it still leads with the South Asian experience and again continues to lessen ours and like just make us voiceless. And then I think if I think about the book, you know, we are all birds of Uganda, and going back to this whole assimilation thing, like I'm not really sure if we all are birds of Uganda, you know, if we're not going to assimilate. I'm not saying that I'm not making a claim about who can call themselves Ugandans, but I think it's questionable. And I think lastly as well, like what's not emphasized enough that Hafsa does actually outside of the book is talk about the fact that when the Asians came, when they were brought over, it was part of a British colonial project, right? So they were allowed to be traders and business people, whereas we were just left to be farmers. You know, that's a head start. That's what that's what we call, definitely. That's a huge head start. And like, we're not framing that in the context of us being lazy and then being industrious.
It's just we didn't have the opportunity like they did.
Yeah, but nonetheless, like I'm really glad I read the book because I think I know a lot of Ugandans who found out that Hafsa is not Ugandan have been quite dismissive. I think it's really important. It's really important for us to know what's being written about our country. And like generally speaking, I think she's opened up a conversation.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think that's a great way to end it. Unless Vivian, you wanted to say something else, but I think that was a great way of ending it.
No, I'm good. I'm happy with Katasi's ending. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, with that in mind, Vivian, thank you. Do you have anything you want to say, like plug or like how people can reach you, what you're doing at the moment?
So I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just really glad that I got to be a part of this session. I am going to look up more Ugandan authors. I'm going to look up Makumbi and see what I can get. But yeah, my Instagram is Mrs_Miti. And yeah, just hope that people just continue reading more and just expanding their minds.
Amazing. I couldn't agree more. And yeah, and myself, you know, the usual, you can find me on kalungi.co.uk. It's got access to all my various creative endeavors, from my clothing line, Kalungem, to my music. You know, my debut album, Katugende, is available to stream on all streaming sites, whether you want to find it on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever. And I've got an upcoming project, so look out for that as well. 30th of April, something's coming. And yeah, just follow me, Kalungi Fresh, or Kalungi_ on Twitter, Kalungi Fresh on Instagram. And yes, after Katasi, I'll let you know what we're gonna do in regards to the next session.
Thank you. I'm not working anything new that I haven't mentioned, but you can find all my content, my platform on www.elevate256.com. And actually, if you're interested, I have a food podcast, and on the Ugandan episode, I talk a lot about like South Asian identity, and I'm on it with two Sri Lankans. So it's really quite interesting. So the podcast is called Unsavory Ethnic Types. And that's also on the website. You can find a link to that. It's on Spotify and on Apple Music as well. So yeah, thank you. And Vivian, thank you for joining us. It was really nice to have a fresh voice.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciated your candor and your passion. So I appreciate it. I like a good.
But I love that. I might have had one point of view, but it's just refreshing to hear someone else's point of view. And then you're like, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't think of it that way, but maybe. So thank you so much for both of you for bearing with me.
No, likewise. I forgot to mention that by the time this comes out, I probably would have started filming it already. I'm working on a short film starring 2 Ugandan actresses, and it's a short film that I've written and will be directing and starring in alongside the 2 Ugandan actresses. And it's touching on marriage of conveniences, when people marry to get spousal visas, and it's set in the UK, and it's a beautiful love story between a young grieving man who is grieving the death of his fiance, and then he's hooked up by a Ugandan woman desperate to make a better life for herself and a young son who's back in Uganda. So look out for that. That's coming out. It's called Marriage Plan, produced by US Films, Saritai Marufu. So boom. So next session, which will be next month in April, we'll obviously be reading a brand new book. So Vivian, please, hopefully you can make it, and it'll be great to be able to see you. It'll be great to see you on the Zoom, because I know you were ironing, so we didn't want to.
I'm done ironing.
Oh, okay. So we could have got you eventually, but next time we really want to see you because we love to be able to see our members. So yeah, we'll send you an email. Send I'm sure Katasi's got your email or your details, so we'll add you to the list. And we'll send you details for the next book. I have a few ideas, but if you got any, let us know. So, boom. Thank you very much. Katasi, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I'm good. Have a great week, everybody.
Oh, you too, guys. Month. Take care. Nice to meet you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Likewise. Bye. Bye. Bye.
The one that fits you. Did you but you tunda? All on day the one that fits ya. Katikin did you but you tunda? All on day the one that fits ya. The moon they are gone, say I know she can mash it up. She put it in reverse just to show she can back it up. The kick that she